Hello, welcome back to the Exchange Podcast. We are back after about, 1 or 2 weeks. We took time off for 1 week. We took time off for Thanksgiving. That was last week, right? Yeah. So we are back now, and you might miss one voice, but we'd already said that Javon would be stepping away from the mic for some amount of time. We're not exactly sure. But it is good to be back, and Michael, go ahead and greet everyone.
Hey, everybody. How's it going? Hope things are well for you.
Yeah. So how was your Thanksgiving?
It was excellent.
Well,
I was going to say I was really humbled. I had to retire in June I medically retired from the police department, and the city reached out, and the Rotary Club of Maumelle reached out, and they ended up catering our Thanksgiving, which really was humbling.
Well, that's good.
That was awesome.
I saw something on Facebook about that, but I wasn't. That's what that was. They were catering. With everything going on, there's really been just a whole lot. For those of you who don't know, I mean, you've already. I think you mentioned it last week that you're dealing with ALS, and so those of you who are listening to us, keep him in your prayers. We believe in a God who heals, and we're definitely holding on to that. And we're not, there's nothing that is impossible for God to do. And I've personally known people that have been healed from things that the doctors have said there was no coming back from. Church that I grew up in, we had two people, a while apart, but two people that died in the church services. And people prayed, they came back. Some people say, well, I have a hard time believing that. Well, you know what? It happens. It happens. And I had a I don't know, he's probably whatever age third graders are, and today he wanted to argue with me the existence of God. So I tried not to be extremely arrogant with him, but I just asked him, I said, well, how do you know that? I said, have you ever met him? And he said, well, no, but scientists said it, and scientists, they know. I said, oh, are scientists God? He said, well, no. I said, so are they, that they've never met him? He goes, no. I said, so how do they know? You said they know. How do they know? And I was being easy on him. I didn't want to discourage him, but it was one of those things where it's like, if you're going to make that statement.
Yeah, bold claim there, buddy.
Especially coming from someone that age. But I think what concerns me is that they're really coming after that age group, because that age group's the next generation. And there's just this all out, if you will, attack on the kids, and has been for years. But it's almost like it's really ramped up even more. Even more over the past decade, because a lot of the millennials, which now I guess are what? Are you a millennial?
I guess technically, yes.
Yeah, because how old are you? 30?
37.
37, yeah, you are. Because my generation is kind of between the Gen Xers and the millennials. And so the millennials kind of was a lot of that generation are the ones that have kind of moved away from church. And then
I was going to say, there's been a trend moving away from the church for quite a while.
Yeah.
But they really kind of...
They kind of really embraced it, too, with the whole COVID thing. Because COVID was the first time our government said, that's the first time in American history that our government told us that we could or couldn't have church. Or that businesses couldn't open up. The first time the government stepped in and said, this is what's going to happen, or this is what is not going to happen, whatever. But that generation, they were kind of the trend that started moving away from it. And then
It's like a roller coaster just picking up speed.
Yeah. And what do they call it now? I think it's the Gen Z. Is it Gen Z?
Well, Gen Z was after millennials, but I don't know if they've picked up another.
I think it's because, I was actually looking. Give me just a minute here, because this is okay. Actually, this segues into a little bit about what we're talking about, and I'm going to have to go back here a little bit. Someone sent me something a few months ago about the generation gaps, and it's funny because generation gaps, I think, are typically 20 years, I believe, something like that, somewhere around that. And what the discussion that me and this individual were having was how that they're trying to say that far more of our population are identifying as gay or LGBT community, and I really want to find it, because when I looked at it immediately, I texted the guy back, and I said, but if you see what they're doing here, they are skewing the numbers, because these are not realistic numbers. And that is what they're doing. They're taking liberty with certain numbers that they should not be doing. But what it's doing is it helps out their argument. And there's not as many people. I still don't think there's as many people that are part of the LGBT, and that's certainly not what we're discussing tonight. But I think what they do is they skew the numbers. Okay, right here, I found it. The silent generation, 1928 to 1945, which is 78 to 95 years old. That also known as the baby boomers. No. The silent generation was the World War II generation.
Boomers come right after that.
Yeah. So from 1946 to 64. Then Gen X is 65 to 80. Okay, so what we're seeing here is a trend of about 15 years. Is that right?
Yes.
And then millennials are 81 to 96. Now watch this. Watch this. This is where it changes at Gen Z. Gen Z is 97 to 2012. That's more than 15, right?
Well, so mine, what I'm looking at right now, it says the 7 living generations, and it has Gen Z born 1996 through 2012, which would give an extra year in there.
Yeah. So
that'd be 16.
So what they're doing is they are essentially what they're doing is they are all these kids now are not watching regular news. They're watching TikTok, which, by the way, I've thought about taking the Exchange podcast on TikTok. Not necessarily the podcast itself, but having something on TikTok. And the reason why is I was listening to something last week, and all these kids are on TikTok talking about the Quran and how great the Quran is. And I think there needs to be some way to answer that. If I got enough following, I don't know, maybe they'd kick us off. But I don't know. But anyway, I mean, what have you been looking at this week? What do you got for us?
Well, so there's a couple of things that were going on in the world that I had taken note of. Let me scroll through here. Some interesting things that I've noticed, like Finland closing the border with Russia.
Okay.
All eyes are on Russia. Something else I thought was interesting is...
You sent that one to me.
You and I had discussed it, how the Wagner Group in Russia was looking to support Iran and or the group in Lebanon there, not Hamas,
or
not Hamas, the other further north of Israel.
Yeah.
Of course, I bring it up now. Neither one of it.
There's Hamas, and then there are Taliban, not Taliban. Anyway,
as we both lose it here.
This is the Exchange podcast.
Yeah, we're all losing our minds.
But anyway, go ahead.
I thought it was interesting how world politics, because I'd call this a while back.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Russia would, there's no doubt that they're allied with Iran,
Mm-hmm.
but that they would, and now it's I don't remember which intelligence agency. It was a classified document that got leaked,
Right.
but talking about how Russia was looking to support Iran, and then as a proxy, the terrorists to the north of Israel. Something else I thought was interesting was the North Korea spy satellite. They're claiming, oh, we took pictures of the Pentagon and the White House, and I'm like, so does Google Earth. I'm not really sure why. Yeah, everybody's got spy satellites at this point. To me, that's
Well, and you mentioned Russia because that's interesting. That that's a lot of people believe. There's a lot of people within the Christian ranks that believe that Russia is part of Gog and Magog, and I don't know, maybe not. But Gog and Magog actually, when you read about it in Revelation 20, chapter 20, I believe, verse 8, and it says that after the 1,000 years, and what that means is after the millennial reign. So those of us who are pre-tribulation, we believe in a rapture. We believe in a 7-year tribulation. Then after the 7-year tribulation, there's the Battle of Armageddon. And then after that, you have the millennial reign, which is 1,000 years of peace. And the Bible says that Satan and the beast are cast into the bottomless pit. After that 1,000 years, Satan is then released. It's at that point Gog and Magog come down against Israel. And it's at that point that God destroys them. Now, I say that because whether it's Russia or not, we have to remember the Bible says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against every principality. So, what that shows you is that even after the 1,000-year millennial reign, people are still, and they're going to prosper. They're going to have, that 1,000 years of peace is going to be they signed the 7-year peace treaty with the Antichrist, and then 3.5 years into it, he breaks it. That 1,000-year peace treaty is going to be held. It's going to be to the letter. Christ is going to hold it because he's the Prince of Peace. But even after that, human nature is still going to want to rebel against that and come down against Israel. And they're still going to try to destroy Israel. Satan, or the great red dragon that the Bible talks about, not the movie, the great red dragon, Anthony, was it Anthony Hopkins? Hannibal Lecter. Yeah, not that movie he made. But he's still going to try to destroy Israel. And so Israel is a real thorn in his side. And we said last week on the podcast, what brings these groups like LGBTQ plus and Hamas, who they hate LGBTQ plus.
Yeah.
They hate them. What is that? What do they call that? An ion bond in chemistry? I believe, what is that thing that attracts them?
I think it just comes down to the enemy of my enemy is my friend. They've adopted that ideology.
The enemy is my, but it's also too that you have the spirit. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. So it is that spirit that drives them, both of them. And both of them are driven by that great red dragon that Revelation talks about. It's driven by Satan. And they both, you look at the protests against Israel. You were talking about that, and so when you look at a group like the Wagner Group, well, I think they're all mercenaries, aren't they?
Pretty much, yes.
They got a lot of money. The guy I think who founded them, he's an oligarch. Am I correct? I believe so. I think he's an oligarch. So he's ready to. One of the standing jokes around the podcast here at the Exchange Podcast is George Soros did it, or George. You've heard the devil made me do it. Our little joke is George Soros made me do it. But George Soros is a real guy, and the founder of the Wagner Group. These guys are driven by the very nature and spirit of the God of this world. So yeah, it's not unfathoming to think that these guys want to. They would want to destroy Israel.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. I think their main goal is as far as Israel's concerned, is that they're one of our main ally in the Middle East, and
Yep.
if they can cripple that,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot of resources such as oil.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a giant chess game, and everybody's moving their pieces, trying to figure out how to get a bigger slice of the pie. And I think that they're looking at it because Russia at one point supported Israel. However,
Right.
because during the founding of Israel, roughly half of them were socialist or Marxist, and
Yeah.
so the Russians thought they would have a foothold in the Middle East.
Right.
When that didn't come to fruition, they kicked them to the curb.
Yeah.
And that's why we've become more strongly allied with them, and they've fallen away.
So you sent me another thing too. It was a CNN article.
About the
federal officials investigating after pro-Iran group allegedly hacked water authority in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, because it was using Israeli manufactured equipment.
Well, it says a Pennsylvania water utility is still dealing with the fallout from pro-Iran hackers breaching some of the industrial equipment 4 days ago. Of course, I don't know when this was written. November 28th, so it's been longer than 4 days ago now, but including to operate one of its water pump stations in manual mode. The utility's general manager told CNN on Tuesday, "It's a pain," Robert J. Bible said. Well, he's got a very interesting name, you know. I mean, Bible, you know, somebody's got to wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning and go turn on or turn off. So this has to do, I read it, but I'll go ahead and let you answer it. So this has to do with their using Israeli equipment?
Yes, because some of the I guess the pump that they're using was manufactured in Israel.
So that would be the only reason they would attack this, because I mean this water system is not attacking. I mean it's not affecting the nation's water system, right?
No.
I mean so you know you get all these arguments. I heard someone the other day. I heard someone today. They watched a debate on this flat earther versus whether the world's. I don't know why that's a debate, but anyway, point being, I look at all this stuff and I go, it's a distraction for people that are that claim to be Christians, right? I mean, there's so many distractions out there right now, and I don't know if you saw it, but it was yesterday, I think. One of our ships was fired on in the Red Sea. And I'll be honest with you. I do not blame Israel. I'm very pro-Israel. This podcast is pro-Israel. I'm pro-America. I love this country. But when I hear that, sometimes I feel like the government is the boy who cried wolf. Because when I hear that one of the ships have been fired on, I immediately go to Gulf of Tonkin.
Yeah.
Are they manipulating this to drive us into something?
Yeah. Some kind of false flag. You never know at this point. I mean, you'd like to think that your government wouldn't do that, but when you really start to look at some of the things that the United States government's been mixed up in, it's really not a stone's throw.
Well, I mean, President Eisenhower warned us against the military-industrial complex. Shed a little light on it. I mean, you've been in the military, and I'm not trying to get you to.
Well, there's money in war,
right?
If you think about jets and tanks and all
Yeah.
of those things, there's lots and lots of money floating around. When you're talking about multi-million-dollar jets, there's a lot of money to be lost if those things aren't needed.
Right.
And I mean, think about how large some of those manufacturers are and how many. I would assume billions of dollars.
Uh-huh.
I don't have an exact number, but like when you start playing with that much money, people take notice.
Well, that's it. And here's another thing that this is really hitting out right now. Never heard of it. Maybe you have. White lung pneumonia. Is this the new COVID?
Well, so China has this alleged respiratory illness, mystery illness, and then now in Ohio.
Wait a minute. Are the Democrats now saying that China released this?
No.
Okay.
They're saying that this is completely separate, but
I mean, are they even in agreement that this has come from China?
No.
Okay.
They're saying that the outbreak there in Ohio is a completely separate incident, but I don't believe in coincidences, and that the timing is more than ironic.
It's perfect.
You know, like, come on.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
So we get to wear a mask plus we're going to get to wear a mask plus a breathing tube.
Yeah, well, so here you go. I just pulled up the statistics. The United States spent $766 billion on national defense during the fiscal year of 2022. $766 billion.
Our defense or
that's our national defense budget. 760.
Yeah, but I mean, with all the money that we sent Zelensky.
Well, even if you takes a few billion out of that, regardless. I mean,
yeah.
$766 billion.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
I think they're gearing up for something. That's my personal thought. They're gearing up for something. They didn't have war the entire 4 years of Donald Trump. Even liberals on the left cannot argue that. They have to admit it. There was not war the entire 4 years. That we were supposed to be involved in World War III by the end of his presidency, but we weren't. No new wars. He had already set the plans in place to get us out of Afghanistan. Biden comes into office. We're already involved. We're not fighting, but we're already involved with Zelensky and the Ukraine, and now we're involved with what's going on in Israel. I don't blame Israel. I know there are people that are saying that Israel killed. How many people died? 1,700 people. 1,700 Israelis died October 7th, something like that. There's people saying that the Israeli government killed those people. I don't believe that. I believe that it was an attack. I do believe that. But at the same token, like you said, there's money to be made from war, and there's also power to be garnered from war. And, prior to, you and I have discussed this before, not on the podcast, but the whole purpose of the Second Amendment was you and I are supposed to be the first line of defense, meaning America, our citizens.
Yes.
Not our military.
So there's several facets to the Second Amendment. Essentially, my phrase on it is you are your own first responder.
Uh-huh.
Okay, you are responsible for protecting yourself and your family.
Yeah.
But on top of that, the reason it was written, I think the main driving force behind it was to protect yourself from a tyrannical government.
Right.
And I mean, that's the reason it exists. Is
Uh-huh.
so when your government goes AWOL,
Mm-hmm.
you have the right to protect yourself against it. But in doing so, you protect yourself, your property. I think that's why they're so big on taking it away.
I had this conversation earlier this week. No, late last week, because it's early this week. This is Monday. Late last week. And the idea is that we would, if the war came, you went to and prior to that, all 50 states didn't have to sign on to a war. Amazingly enough, they didn't have to say, yeah, we'll all go fight the war. It just was a common.
As a constitutional republic, each state ran it essentially as its own.
Yeah.
As its own. Yes, we're all part of the United States, but
define for us, our listeners, just a little bit, what separates us from a democracy.
What the way
you
it
use
was
that word.
Well,
I like that word. I agree with you, but
the way it was envisioned would be that each state was anything that was not explicitly lined out in the Constitution would be up to the state,
right?
And the state would be responsible for its own upkeeping.
Right. Yeah.
We like to throw around the term democracy, and some people say it's interchangeable. I don't believe it is.
No, I don't think so at all.
Arkansas can set its own laws as long as it does not violate the Constitution of the United States.
Yeah.
But that differs from New York or differs from California. During the Civil War, many soldiers sided with their state. It wasn't an issue of this or that.
There were counties that seceded from the Union, and there were counties that never did go with the Confederacy.
Yes. Well, and Robert E. Lee, the most famous general from the Confederacy, said, "As Virginia goes, as do I."
Yeah.
He
didn't want to fight for the Confederacy.
No. In fact, he didn't own slaves.
Right.
Ironically.
Yeah.
But he said, if my state goes, decides to secede, then I will go with my state. We've lost sight of that.
Yeah.
Basically, like I said, each state. Well, okay. In terms of the world, you could say that each state operated as an independent country.
That's right.
We had.
That's why you had militias.
Yes, you had an interest that encompassed the entire country. However, your state was responsible for itself.
That's right.
The federal government was limited, and your state was responsible for maintaining all of the amenities and everything else. I think that's why they like to use the democracy, because it gives the federal government more power.
Gives them more power. See, that because that was what I was talking with this guy. If you go to, you look at the state. Okay, SEC football's coming to an end. Everybody knows Tennessee Vols. You may or may not know why they're called Vols. It's because it stands for volunteer. Why do they call themselves volunteer? Because Tennessee's called the volunteer state. Why is Tennessee called the volunteer state? Because Tennessee would always send the most volunteers anytime the country got into war. Because, just in case. Because, you may go into war and Arkansas says, hey, this isn't exactly my war. So they wouldn't go fight it. You had to sell the idea. I mean, this is why that in the original Declaration of Independence, there's a lot of that was taken out, because the original Declaration of Independence, the founders laid the onus of slavery on the king. Because the founders, most of them wanted to get rid of slavery. Just as you said, Robert E. Lee did not own slaves. And if you go back, and I would recommend anyone, I would suggest to anyone, you can go on Google. You can even go on, I think, on the History Channel website, amazingly enough, as left-wing as they are. And you can type in the original Declaration of Independence. It's a whole lot longer than what ours that we have right now are, because they specifically denounced slavery. And the reason they omitted all that was because they needed South Carolina and I can't remember which other state it was, which other colony it was. They knew they were going to war, and they needed them. And they knew that if they did not omit that, those two colonies would not join. So what they had to do was make a like you said, a general. Hey, this is a general interest for all of us. And so we would build an army, go fight the war, go win the war, come back home, disband the army, everybody live their lives. That was the idea. That's the reason why that with the Barbary Pirates, Washington said in I think it was his 7th year of presidency, and I don't remember, I can't remember, it was up, I think it was in the millions that we were paying them to get our own ships back. That's why we went and fought them.
Well, exactly. So the British had a custom of just paying them a ransom, so that they could traverse the waters without being attacked. And the United States didn't want to play that game.
Nope.
So we sent the United States Navy over there and put an end to the Barbary Pirates.
Yeah, because Washington said, I would to God I had an army to wipe these people off the face of the map.
Yeah.
And amazingly enough, everybody wants to talk about Thomas Jefferson having a copy of the Koran. He did, but they don't tell people why he had a copy of the Koran. The reason he had the copy of the Koran was because they went over there to go meet that caliph, and he was telling them, oh yeah, my Koran says, my religion says that anyone who does not submit to Islam, because Americans back then thought, hey, you know what? They're not going to, because even Thomas Jefferson, and I believe it was Adams that went over there, and Jefferson, I think it was those three. Jefferson, Adams, and who was the third? Man, my memory's slipping me tonight. But there were three of them that went over there, and he's telling them, my religion says I can kill anyone who does not submit to Islam. And they thought, well, he's just wanting to attack Christian nations. America's not a Christian nation. We are a constitutional Christian founded on Christian principles, but we're not a Christian nation. And their thoughts was, we're freedom of religion. So if you want to worship Allah, as long as it doesn't, you're not trying to enforce. What they couldn't believe was this guy was saying, no, we want America to have to submit to Islam and to Allah. And he showed them the passages. So Jefferson again, making a common interest, because he said nobody's going to want to fight this war. Nobody wants to fight it. They don't have the stomach for it. So in order to make a common interest, they come back and they start publishing all of these passages and giving the context of those passages to the colonies and saying this is what they're doing and why they're doing it. And now the American people were going, oh, okay, let's go fight them.
Yeah.
And like you said, we send the Navy over there and we took care of business.
Oh, yeah.
That's what America was always supposed to do. We were never supposed to have this military to police the world.
No, we somewhere diverted off the path. That's what the founders were terrified of.
Yeah.
Because it gave the government too much power.
Uh-huh.
The power was supposed to, and we've talked about this before, I know I have. The Constitution was written to limit the federal government's power.
Right.
Not to grant it powers. It was to say it is only for these purposes, and that's it. Somewhere along the way, we totally lost sight of that and have given them far too much power. Do I think that we need a federal government? Yes, but do I think it needs to be? It's just like, I think this is not the best analogy, but it would be like when Elon Musk took over Twitter and they fired 80% of the employees,
right.
and somehow it still ran because there was so much unnecessary spending and so many unnecessary employees that once they were eliminated, or those positions were eliminated, the company still functioned.
Right. And, and getting back to kind of what we were talking about, I want to be very careful. I want people to understand I am pro-Israel. Call me a Zionist. I don't care what you want to call me. I'm pro-Israel. And John Adams, this is what he had to say about the Jews. He said, they're the most glorious nation that ever inhabited the earth. He challenged anti-Semitism because the French Enlightenment, which ultimately is what led to the French Revolution, again, there was a situation where they wanted to go. Thomas Paine and Thomas Jefferson put pressure on Washington to go fight that, and Washington said, "This isn't our revolution," and he wasn't saying in this because they helped. I mean, France was our first ally, and he wasn't saying, "Well, they helped us, but we're not going to help them." He was saying, "This is not the revolution. They're not fighting for the same reason we fought for."
Yeah.
And so in the Enlightenment, which ultimately the French Revolution is what would influence guys like Nietzsche and who would eventually influence guys like Karl Marx, because the French Enlightenment period was
all about class warfare.
Yeah.
The bourgeoisie.
Yes.
And, the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, which you hear a lot of that sentiment still passed around today. I look back, of course, I'm going on a tangent here, but, when McCarthy said that we had a bunch of pinkos, we had a bunch of communist sympathizers in the government, he wasn't far off. And if you look, the government, especially one particular party in general, has really trended in that direction, to outright socialism and Marxism.
Well, and Adams said, and I agree with him, in 1809, he said, God ordained the Jews to be the most essential instrument for civilizing nations. And he did. When you look at the Old Testament, the whole purpose of God bringing them together was he wanted them to proselytize, the pagans out of their ritualistic, false deity worship, and bring them into Judaism. And so that was their idea. Same thing that we as the church are supposed to do now. But that was why God ordained them, and Adams believed this, and Adams was very much a pro-Jewish person. As a matter of fact, he tried desperately. It wasn't just Adams, but there was also, not just Adams, but there were other. Founding fathers that was also very pro-Jewish. But one of the things that in 1819 there was Noah, his full name was Mordecai Manuel Noah. And he was Jewish. Obviously, with a name like that, you can tell that. And he was a good friend of the Founding Fathers, an extremely good friend of Adams. And Adams said this about him. He said, Noah could be at the head of 100,000 Israelites and marching with them into Judea and making a conquest of that country and restoring your nation to the dominion of it. For I really wish the Jews again in Judea an independent nation. So our founders even believed that America's the reason for our founding primarily was to restore Israel back as a nation. Why? Because they believed the prophecy in the Bible that Israel would come back together as a nation. And I do believe that God has used America for that. I mean, shortly after World War II, they come back together. Was that 46, 48? I can't remember.
So they were officially a nation in 48.
48, okay. That was I keep getting those years mixed up. 48 was the year. They come back together officially. And when you look at, and we've discussed this here before, Palestine is not a real nation. Palestine is not a real people. Palestine, and you've mentioned this before, it comes from a Latin word for Philistine. And it was there basically to insult the Jewish people, saying, hey, we're going to kick you out of your land and we're going to move Philistines, who we happen to know has been your arch nemesis since day one. And so the Jewish people have been very slandered and very hated. But the thing is, something is really fueling that in our country. And I think a lot of it is coming from, most of these guys, like we were talking earlier, most of these guys are watching TikTok and just listening to all these influencers, and none of them are telling the truth, or are they completely informed in what they're saying.
Yeah, well, I think the easiest way to form a rebuttal is to go read a history book.
Yes.
Look at what has actually occurred in history, and it'll alter your perception of current world events. Yeah. But they listen to these people that have no founding or understanding of how these things came to be, and then they just run with it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when you look, it has been Jewish people that have funded heavily places like Harvard and Yale, these colleges that are having people to march against and protest them. And you can go all through, like you said, go pick up a history book. We have had over the history of this country, we have had very wealthy Jewish individuals that have picked up and paid the debt of the United States. And they've not tried to own the United States in doing so. They've just said, hey, the country's in trouble. I love the country. Why? Because from the very beginning, America, like John Adams and different founding fathers, they were very favorable to the Jewish people. And God said, those that bless you, I will bless them. And it's that simple. It really is that simple. And that is what's so concerning about seeing all these people marching and protesting. Because I'm going, how exactly has this crept in to American society to this level?
It's the love of self is one of the facets of that. But it's social media. I really think that that's a tool that the devil uses to get into people's minds, because there's so much garbage out there. Mm-hmm. Very little. Now, I get on social media, and, there are appropriate things on there, but an overwhelming majority of it is not. It's mind-numbing waste.
Yeah.
And they're so absorbed in it that they lose almost a sense of reality of what the world is actually like.
Yeah. You're talking about the people on social media?
Yes.
Yeah, because one of the things you find with a lot of people on social media is, I don't know if they're just willingly, part of me believes they are, willingly denying reality. They're looking at the world as it is, and they're just denying the reality of it. I often liken many people in the church as to Nero when it says that while Rome burned, Nero fiddled. And I think a lot of people just kind of do look at it. They're going, well, I just soon turn that off and not pay attention.
So the thing is, the American people have become really, I don't know what the best term for it would be, but as long as they've got their amenities, they've got their smartphone, they've got their TV, they're watching TikTok, literally the world could be burning and they're like, it's the meme. It's fine. This is fine. Everything's fine.
Right.
Like, you don't understand that the world is a volatile place.
Yes.
And it would not be hard to upset some people's ways of life. I mean, just a simple thing. They have
COVID proved that.
They have no concept of how hard most of the world has it compared to this country.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, you look at the most of the world. You've got people. You go into some of these countries. You have people that are literally, they will drink water out of muddy potholes, just to get water. I mean, we've got 3 and 4 different brands of bottled water. I mean, you can even have.
Go turn your tap on.
Yeah,
you've got running water.
You got running water.
They don't realize the amenities. It's that whole first world problems.
Yeah,
they're unaware of how a majority of the world lives,
right,
and how fortunate we are to live here.
Yeah,
and that's one of the things I find most detestable is they. A lot of times we'll talk about how horrible this country is and how bad the conditions are. And I'm like, you have no idea. No idea.
No, you're right. It's first world problems. And that's really what I want to, that's really what I would like to be able to talk to people about is, I'm one guy. I get it. We're one pipe, it's just you and I and as far as behind the mic, and we have guests on from time to time. But I would really like to, somehow, God being my helper, not take it personally, but try to talk some kind of sense into as many people, because you're going, you don't understand how blessed you are. Like you said, I mean, just go, you got running water in your bathroom. Some people don't even get a shower once a week sometimes.
No. They're dealing with malaria, malnutrition, starvation, diseases that we've eradicated in this country. I mean, there's a whole slew of things, and even there's people out there that still have to deal with wild animals that may kill them. Mosquitoes are the number one killer. Like we don't realize that. Yes, we go through hardships. ALS is not easy, but I still have it better than an overwhelming majority of the world.
Well, I mean, you look at people. I mean, when COVID hit 3 years ago, how many people were? They sat at home. They had their streaming services. Their cable was not affected. Their lights weren't affected. I mean, many of these guys, they were like, well, we're going to give them 3 months, whatever. Now, again, I think all that was to condition us for something else. But I also think, I look at that and I go, the rest of the world would look at us and go, man, our normal lives, COVID, really? We're not even worried about that. White lung pneumonia, we're not worried about that. I mean, we're worried about,
finding food for the day.
Yeah.
How do I feed my children?
Yeah.
The thing that concerns me the most about American society now is it's very difficult to have a civil conversation with someone who disagrees with you, or with someone with whom you disagree.
Right.
I think there's several facets to that. I think one is people don't like to be challenged. So anytime that you ask them for empirical evidence, or you ask them for something for which they are basing their claims, it immediately shuts down, and it becomes a list of derogatory terms or cuss words, because there is no legitimate rebuttal. They just believe what someone else has regurgitated. And you can't, it's very difficult to have a conversation. Now, occasionally it is not that way. You can have a rational, civil conversation, even with someone with whom you disagree.
Right.
And at least come to an understanding of how you came to that conclusion or what evidence you're basing your opinion off of. But it's becoming more and more difficult because people just want to shut down and curse at you and storm off. There's no, well, why do you believe that? Or what evidence do you have? Because that might alter your opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I was just looking here. We talk about America, but in 1947, Joseph Stalin, he strongly supported the creation of Israel. What it was, he hoped that Israel would be basically. And this actually, you find this in Israel's history a couple of times. With the Medo-Persians, they sent Israel back to kind of be a buffer state between them and Egypt. So there's always been these countries that have sent Israel back to kind of be that. And he wanted Israel to be a strong ally of the Soviet Union.
Yes, well, and the British were still prominent in the Middle East, and they still had good standings with several of the Arab nations. And so,
well, and see too, because in the 1920s and 30s, 30s more so, but you had a lot of, I think we've discussed this here before, but that's how come it's no longer called Persia and it is now called Iran, because Iran, basically, when you look it up, it means land of the Aryan. And they wanted to be friendly to the Nazis. The Nazis was going over there and creating all these allies with the so-called Palestinians and the Arabs in order to try and persecute, because Hitler hated the Jewish people. Russia was the whole point. Russia wants the oil over there. Russia knows they've got to have it. Their land is not good for the kind of empire they've been trying to build.
Well, I think another thing is, Russia fought in Afghanistan before we did.
Yeah.
And they fought a war that ultimately didn't pay out to them.
Right.
And so I think they also looked at it as, having a stronghold where they could open the door to some of those opportunities and not have to fight their way through.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And call it what you want to, but the Jewish people were smart enough to realize what was going on, and they realized that the American people would have risen up against the government and said, "Hey, we don't want to build an empire over there." And this is why President Eisenhower strongly tried to get the American people not to allow the military-industrial complex, because we were never supposed to be an empire builder or even a nation builder. We were always supposed to be America first, always, because we've always realized if it's not America first, we can't take care of anybody else.
Which is why support for World War II was non-existent.
Yes, that's right.
After the horrors of World War I, the U.S. didn't want the U.S. populace didn't want another war.
No.
And had it not been for Pearl Harbor, we wouldn't have entered the war. Which that's a whole nother rabbit hole to go down.
And we very well might later down the line. Because a lot of this stuff I think people do enjoy listening to. Because that is stuff that I think. At some point I do think that'd probably be something good to spin a podcast on. Like you said, because you look at where we are now. History repeats itself, unfortunately. And they were war weary when we got involved in World War II. And Americans are war weary now. We've spent almost 20 years. We spent 20 years in the Middle East, and now we're wanting to go back.
Yeah.
And I do believe that we should support our allies over there, but they're wanting to go back, and the American people are going, not so.
Yeah, they're not sold on it.
No, not at all. But that, I will pick up the mantle and say this has been a great exchange, and I want to say thank you for each and every one of you that come here, and we're going to leave it off there for this podcast, and looking forward to some really good conversations. Go to YouTube. hit the like, the subscribe, share. Go to Facebook, like, subscribe, and share. Tell your friends about it. I talked to someone this week, and it looks like we're probably going to pick up some more listeners. I love getting listeners here, and more than listeners. Go into the comments section, leave some comments, ask some questions. I'm going to start doing I keep saying we're going to start doing a Q&A section on Facebook, and I want your questions. Please feel free to ask them. Well, I've said this since day one of this podcast. I'm saying it again. Your questions are not going to shock us. Keep it clean. Watch the language. If you don't, then I'll just censor it and I won't say the word. But, yeah, please feel free. We want to hear from you. We've got a goal, 100 subscribers by the 100th episode. I'm actually wanting 1,000, but we're looking for 100. Been a good exchange. Michael, say something on the way out here, man.
Well, I welcome everyone to get involved. If there's a topic that you want to discuss or you have questions, I mean that's how we grow together. Mm-hmm. That's how we develop. That's how we come to an understanding, and we can learn about ourselves and each other, and how we all, because like I always say, we have far more in common than we realize,
and that's what we got to find.
Exactly, and this is a good platform to do it. And it helps us out with topics or what people want to hear. Mm-hmm. If you've got something that's really, really, as we say, it's burning a hole in your pocket, you got to get it out there, then send it to us and we'll see what we can do.
Yeah, be glad to answer them. And until next week, be blessed, be safe, go with God, and follow His footsteps. You won't go wrong. We will see you next week.